whether they have distributed generation or not.
Mm-hmm.
And what has been a constant policy battle, not only in the co-op world, but with investor-owned utilities who have to get that minimum charge approved by the Public Service Commission, is there is the politics of a low income or a member who does not use a lot of energy to tell them they have to pay more a month just to have the meter there. And so there's always that tension about, yeah, we could raise the minimum bill, but we have to raise it the same for everybody. And that minimum bill, the more you raise it, the more problems you run into politically with those members who, or customers who are on low income or don't use a lot of energy.
So we pay a minimum bill right now,
Right.
and does that show up on our bill generally, or?
Yes. What you'll see normally on a co-op bill, you'll see the availability charge is what we call it, and it'll be that flat rate, and then you have the other piece that's based on how much energy you've used, and we total it up.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Representative McNeil, Representative Barry, gentlemen, if you will pardon the abrogation here of procedure. To be courteous to our distinguished chairman, we'll suspend the hearing on House Bill 481 and commence the hearing on House Bill 1084. Representative Miller, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman, for this indulgence. We have out-of-town experts today, and we sure would like to get them in today. In addition, the Senate has called, so I have to go up in a little bit. Anyway, good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to bring this bill before you. For the record, I am Rocky Miller, representative from District 124, Lake of the Ozarks area. In June 2010, EPA lowered the standards for sulfur dioxide emissions. Each state is required to establish rules to test for these low standards, these lower standards. The states can either model the results or monitor the actual emissions. Modeling is used a lot because it's cheaper, but it can and has been skewed towards higher than actual results. Making sure we are using actual sulfur dioxide levels is very important because removing this element is very expensive. The more you have to remove, the more it is expensive to the customer at the end of the line. This legislation allows for electric generating unit to use monitoring rather than modeling. The monitoring would be paid for by the electric company and not DNR. This legislation will require the correct amount of sulfur dioxide be lowered and not a potential inaccurate modeled amount. This is what this bill does, and I would be open for questions at this time.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, is there anyone here to testify in favor of House Bill 1084? Mr. Fork, I know you are new to this game. If you would please remember to fill out a witness form.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Matt Fork. Yeah, there we go. Good morning. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Matt Fork, and I am employed by Ameren, Missouri. With me today is Steve Whitworth. Steve is our Senior Director of Environmental Policy and Analysis for Ameren, Missouri. We want to thank you for your time this morning to hear this bill, and obviously thank Representative Miller for sponsoring this. I think we've talked before, as many of you know, since 2007, Ameren, Missouri has spent almost $1 billion to comply with EPA. These EPA compliance costs have come in a number of areas: water, fly ash, nitrogen oxide or NOx, NOx, sulfur dioxide or SO2, a number of other areas as well. And we believe this is a common sense approach that can actually potentially save our customers some money when it comes to SO2 emissions. So let us explain. As the Representative Miller said, in June of 2010, the EPA lowered the standard for SO2 in ambient air. Each state was then responsible to establish rules for compliance with EPA's ambient air standard. In order for state air agencies like DNR Air Pollution Control Program to comply, the EPA is allowing states flexibility to choose or develop programs around modeling, which are computer generated, or actual monitoring of the air quality. Modeling has been used, the method used to determine SO2 emissions most of the time because it's a lower cost than a monitor. Yet in many cases, the models are skewed toward giving higher concentrations of SO2 than actually exist. In other words, modeling oftentimes looks for worst case. So if SO2 projections are high enough in a certain area, why is this important, you may be asking? If SO2 projections through a model are high enough in a certain area, that area may be classified as a non-attainment area. That means that there are more costs by companies, such as utilities in that area, to comply in order to keep projected SO2 levels within EPA's limits. So let me be clear. We have and we will comply with all of the EPA's regulations and guidelines. But we want to do so knowing first that the actual air quality does not meet the EPA standard. In other words, we want to use monitoring to collect actual air quality data versus relying on estimates from a computer-generated model. We believe this legislation is common sense. Let me tell you how the legislation works. The legislation would simply allow electric generating units the flexibility to choose between a computer-generated model or an actual monitor. If the monitoring route is chosen, the electric generating unit, not DNR, but the electric generating unit would would pay for the monitoring. In addition, we would make the monitoring data 100% transparent to DNR, and we would also make the data publicly available. In the end, this legislation, we believe, strikes a balance between the need to obtain accurate data through monitoring and the need to continue to provide low-cost energy for our customers in an environmentally responsible manner. This legislation isn't perfect yet. We continue to talk to stakeholders, including DNR, to make some final tweaks to the language, and we look forward to doing that through the process. So again, thank you for your time. Steve is here for any technical questions, and we'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Wow, this is kind of cool. As the chairman, I have a question. This monitoring that you're talking about, that's something that you're doing now, correct?
Not exactly. We monitor emissions that come from our smokestacks, essentially. This is actually ambient air quality data, so these would be off-site monitors that are used to actually determine what, the concentration at ground levels and above that people actually breathe are.
Treat me like a 2-year-old, one of my favorite questions. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, Jim. And ambient, that means stuff coming from wherever, right?
That's, yeah.
Okay.
Air quality in this room, for example.
So then where do they want you to place these monitors? Because if you're presently monitoring from your smokestacks, where would the regulations require you to place these monitors measuring ambient coming from anywhere things?
They're located, in our case, they'll be located off-site, probably a couple miles away in several different directions based on, air trends and things. The EPA actually has guidance that helps you determine where the proper location is for the monitors.
Okay.
And I would add to that, the bill, I didn't bring a copy, which I should have with me, but the bill does have a line in there that these monitors would be set up in consultation with DNR, so we would work collectively with them, and to Steve's point, obviously within EPA's guidelines, to put the number of monitors in the locations that would give us the data that we need. And again, we want to know what the exact numbers are before we make these expensive upgrades for our customers.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Representative McNeil?
Good morning, gentlemen. So just to follow up on that line of questioning, how many monitors do you anticipate you'll need per coal plant or per electrical generating unit?
Yeah, it's based on the facility. So for Rush Island, for example, there would be 3 that would be located in different areas around the vicinity of the plant. And I would add that it doesn't necessarily mean that any of the impacts are from that source. It's actually just measuring the air quality at those locations.
And yeah, so I know there's upwind, downwind, what have you. Is that any concern? I mean, is that part of the decision making the direction generally that the wind goes, or?
Yes, there's a really exacting, I guess you would, or a kind of a detailed meteorology determination that's done to determine where the appropriate location is within a kind of a grid around the plant.
And so you think, and did I hear you say about 3?
Yeah, we anticipate that there'll be one kind of to the northeast, one to the northwest, and one to the southwest based on these locations.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Remley?
Good inquiry. You currently are using computer data for monitoring. How's that, how can you do that? How does that work?
Well, there are, and I'm no air modeling expert, but there are EPA protocols called air dispersion models that are used to determine, air quality impacts and predict concentrations, what the constituents may be at a certain location. And this is something that, both DNR does, EPA does, and other sources can do using these modelings and the assumptions that go into them.
Because that's done by computer analysis, basically.
Right.
Okay. I'm not sure how that would work, but I'm no computer expert either. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hubrecht? Proceed, please.
Just a question. The EPA regulations, making sure that you're in compliance, I know that's very expensive, so this would actually enable you to do what is needed and to be more cost effective, I'm going to assume. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, like we said, EPA changed the standard in 2010, and states are working through how we comply. We just want to make sure we know what the actual emission levels are so that we remain in compliance, keep the quality of air safe. But then if we don't have to make those expensive investments in software equipment yet, the modeling, the monitoring data will tell us that if we are below the limits, then we don't have to make those, and we're managing it in different ways versus other additional investments in environmental equipment.
Okay, right. Thank you. 'Cause right now you're just kind of depending on mathematical models. Isn't that correct?
Well, there are actual emission limits that are determined for sources based on the previous standard. And so at this point in time, we're about 80% below that allowable limit that was determined. Then what DNR needs to do is determine whether that limit is adequately protective or if it needs to be changed. And so what we're advocating is to actually measure air quality in the vicinity and make a determination more empirically with actual data on what the appropriate level of that emission limit that would come to bear on the facility would be.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Corlew?
To inquire.
Proceed, please.
If I understand correctly, under the federal rule that you do at this point have an option, right? Or states have an option to choose either the modeling or the air monitoring, is that correct?
In most cases, ambient air quality is always done with monitoring data. In the case of SO2, because of the level of the standard and the fact that it wasn't an issue, there were very few monitors available. I think there were maybe 8 in Missouri compared to maybe 20 plus for ozone, for example. So as an alternative, EPA has been looking at modeling in lieu of actually collecting data. But monitoring is actually a preferred approach because you get the actual data as well as the meteorology, what's going on with the wind speed and so forth to determine actual concentrations, for example.
Okay, and under the EPA rules, either type of testing is acceptable, is that right? Either the monitoring or the modeling?
Yes, EPA is moving through rulemaking processes now and giving states guidance on the approaches. So states have to actually develop their regulations in accordance with that. And there are a couple rulemakings going forward, both on a state level and a federal level, to fully implement the new standard.
And is the intent of this bill then to just make sure that that the electric generators, that option is preserved, that Missouri DNR won't choose one or the other and specify that you have to use modeling? Is that the intent?
Yes, we're trying to help shore up that I guess, defense of that option and make sure that that's available, and the fact that we believe that that's the correct approach as well.
I think that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative McNeil,
A second time.
proceed.
Gentlemen, how about, so basically you did answer the question that the EPA does allow both modeling and monitoring. And that is correct, right? And how about a timeline? Is there any particular timeline that is out there to get this accomplished, and does the monitoring, I imagine the monitoring would take longer.
Yes, actually for this, the current non-attainment areas, attainment has to be demonstrated by 2018. So there's a time period, and I know MDNR is actually working on regulations that they would have to have in place with emission limits in 2017. We're actually prepared to install monitoring this year and collect 3 years of data prior to that determination being made. And then there's a second portion of the rule that would require kind of a 2020 deadline for other sources that aren't currently in non-attainment areas.
So another question is, you're going to go forward, whether this, with the establishing the monitoring units, and is this legislation really necessary? I mean, if the EPA allows it, and you choose to do it and move forward with it, I'm a little confused by the need for the bill.
Well, we want to make sure that that option is preserved. So there are choices that could be made, regulations can change and so forth. So we think that this is just an additional benefit to have that certainty, to know that this approach that we're taking will be adequately addressed in the future, and be utilized in the future.
And are we sending a message to DNR, I mean, or are we sending it to the EPA with this legislation? I mean, are you concerned about the EPA making regulation that says we need to speed this up and you have to do the modeling instead? Or is it to DNR that you think they may choose to do the modeling?
I think that's a really good question. I guess I would think we're preserving flexibility, but I think if we're sending a message, we're sending it to our customers and your constituents that we want actual data before we make really expensive investments in environmental equipment. If the air is safe, we can prove it through actual data, which is well in compliance with EPA, then that's a good position for us to be in.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out, is there a time limit? Is it, well, you did say 2018, and that is kind of a short timeline, I would think. Is that right? The 2018 is fairly short timeline?
Yes, we're already in process moving forward on getting locations, getting approval from DNR on these, and fully would intend to have data collection beginning this year, so we would have adequate data.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions for this witness? Wow, this is kind of cool. It's like two questions. If I were the real chairman, I'd be like, now, come on, guys. No, I'm sorry. Representative Corley?
If you would indulge me 1 minute, I apologize, I had one other question.
No problem, gentlemen. Please proceed.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I understand in the environmental world that there's, that the EPA and DNR does work with industry groups to come up with numbers and to work collaboratively often in reaching agreements. But could you just address maybe the oversight issue? Because I'm sure we'll hear also that if we accept, or if DNR is to accept your monitoring numbers as opposed to, doing their own, what type of oversight would be there to ensure that those are indeed accurate numbers?
The monitoring system would actually have to meet the standards as if the state would own and operate the monitor, and the data will actually go into their database and then have to meet all the quality assurance requirements by EPA. So it essentially would be just the same as if DNR or one of their contractors was running the system, and we have to adhere to those standards. And then they would ultimately review and QA the data before it gets uploaded into US EPA's database.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions? Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other witnesses to testify in favor of House Bill 1084? And by the way, the chairman had mentioned we have folks from out of town. Do we have any other folks from out of town that are here to testify on this bill? Are you in favor? Against? Okay. We can get you in to go first on the against. Thank you. Gentlemen, go ahead and proceed, and please don't forget a witness form.
Thank you, sir. Trey Davis, registered lobbyist, president of the Missouri Energy Development Association. Just want to go on record in support.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I apologize, I'm losing my voice. Ray McCarty, Associated Industries, Missouri, in favor.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, anyone else to testify in favor of House Bill 1084? Seeing none, anybody here to testify in opposition to House Bill 1084? Gentlemen, there should be a witness form at the table. If you please wouldn't mind filling it out and turning it in to the lovely assistant. And you may proceed when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate an opportunity to speak. My name is John Kissel. I'm a retired physician from the St. Louis area. I'm an honors graduate of Harvard Medical School, did my residency training at the Washington University Medical Center in St. Louis, board certified in internal medicine and a fellow of the American College of Physicians. I'm also a member of the Sierra Club, the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, Union of Concerned Scientists, and others. But I'm here primarily as an advocate for my friends and neighbors, my children and grandchildren that live in the St. Louis area. This sulfur dioxide non-attainment area affects about 2.5 million people that live in the St. Louis area. While this bill is good for Ameren, it's bad for the people of St. Louis. It's a rather torturous and cynical bill, and so I think when you have a bill like this before you, it's helpful to have some sort of a subtitle that allows you to remember what it's about, and we have been calling this the Freedom to Pollute Bill. It basically allows Ameren to choose which method of monitoring or modeling it wishes to use, and more importantly, it allows them to choose that a year from now, and then to begin to collect data, and requires a year of data before anything can be done. Now you need to understand, this bill pertains only to one specific situation, and that is the Rush Island Power Plant in Franklin County. It's defined in such a way that it doesn't pertain to any other electric companies in the state of Missouri or any other locations. And the reason that it has been drafted and pertains to that area is that in fact there has been SO2 monitoring for years in Franklin County, and what it has shown is consistent and repeated violations of the standard. That's why Ameren is being required to do something, and this bill is designed to allow them to be the fox in charge of the henhouse and to delay for years a solution to this problem. So I'm interested in public health issues, and I'm here to talk to you about the effects of sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide, when it comes into contact with water, turns into sulfuric acid. So when you breathe it, that's what is produced in your lungs. It precipitates asthma attacks, and it exacerbates chronic obstructive lung disease. So these are problems of the youth and the elderly, some of the most vulnerable parts of our population. Sulfur dioxide also contributes to the development of small particles, which are less than 2.5 microns and can be breathed deep into the lungs, where they lodge in the most distal parts of the airways and cause lung cancer, premature mortality, heart disease, and heart attacks. And in addition, in recent studies, small particles like this have been implicated as a cause for diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease, all diseases that are epidemic in our population. So Ameren's 3 coal-fired power plants in the St. Louis area have little or no in the way of pollution control. They have no pollution control for sulfur dioxide, which is common in plants in other parts of the country. And a recent study suggested that Those power plants cause 169 premature deaths, 259 heart attacks, 2,830 asthma attacks, and 305 hospitalizations and emergency room visits each year. So that's the annual cost, which has been estimated, the health effect cost as being roughly $1.36 billion a year. That's the cost of allowing Ameren a year's delay in addressing this problem. This price is too high a price for the people of the St. Louis area to pay. So I implore you to reject this bill in the interest of the health of 2.6 million people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for gentlemen? Sir, if I could, yeah, I think we have a question or two for you, if we may indulge.
Absolutely.
Representative Berry.
Inquire.
Proceed, please.
In your testimony, you stated this was about one plant, this Franklin plant. And then in your testimony right after that, you said this is about the 3 plants that Ameren has in the St. Louis area. So which is it, about the 1 plant or about the 3 plants?
This particular bill is a little favor you're being asked to do for Ameren that pertains only to the Rush Island plant now. But I guarantee you that they'll be back, because if they put monitors, see, there are 3 plants, one in South St. Louis County, one in Franklin County, one in Jefferson County. For years, we've been asking DNR to put monitors in those other 2 counties, but there's only been 1 monitor, and that's in Franklin County. So that's the one that shows non-attainment. If they put monitors in South St. Louis County and in Jefferson County, there'll be a non-attainment there too. And then they'll be back asking you to do them a little favor pertaining to those areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Remley?
Inquire.
Proceed, please.
You gave a lot of facts there of people dying and all these other diseases, and you keep referring to studies. I wouldn't mind having a copy of the studies. We asked for the Sierra Club last year for a lot of the studies, that the information they gave, we never received any. So I would like for you to give me some of those studies, and would that be possible for you to do that?
Absolutely. The data that I mentioned was from a study done by the Clean Air Task Force, and I can give you the reference, or if you like, if I can get your information, I'll be glad to send you a copy.
Okay, yeah, I would like that. And also, you know, some of these things, you know, my wife's grandfather, he burned coal in his furnace. I believe me, I was in his house numerous times when it was 90 degrees in his house in the wintertime. But he actually, their family burnt that all their lives. He lived to be in his 90s, and his wife also actually lived up in her 90s as well. And, you know, they burnt this coal raw. They actually shoveled coal into their house, into their basement. And they actually
I did too when I was a kid.
And to just say that all these people die every year because of coal-fired plants, you know, it's, you know, I don't know. I'd just like to, I'd like to see where the studies are, because I just tell you, it's something that I just like to be proven what you're saying is true. Thank you.
Sure. Well, when I shoveled coal into the hamper for the furnace and took out what we called the clinkers, which we now call coal ash, as a kid, it wasn't known what the health effects were. But in recent years, there have been study after study after study. There are 67 identified toxic compounds that are produced from burning coal. And 6 of them involve criteria pollutants by the EPA. So I'd be glad to send you the study, but the science is overwhelming.
I'm sure you can find we can find these in the coal, but what I'm just saying, the studies, I would like, the studies show that actual people are dying, having heart attacks. They also said that, EPA also says that smoke from wood causes heart attacks and lung disease. And that information came from the American Lung Association and the American Heart Association, that I called them numerous times and emailed them, and they would not confirm that they ever said that.
Well,
And you know, the EPA said this causes heart attack, and lung disease, but yet I called the American Heart Association and the American Lung Association. I called them myself and emailed myself, and neither one would confirm it. And Missouri Heart Association said that it's not true, and the American Lung Association said that there's no way that this is true. So, you know, we have things here that I want true facts. And you know, when people hear these kind of things, these numbers, it scares them. And when you play on people's fear, we have people that actually get involved. They cry at the microphones and are afraid to have their kids play in the front yard. I've seen them testify in the Region 7, and a lot of these people were from the Sierra Club. And actually, they had their when you're afraid to tell your kids you can't play in the front yard because of coal emissions from CO2, or saying that CO2 emissions caused Katrina, or the CO2 emissions caused the Joplin tornado. I don't know how in the world can you prove that stuff, but yet they're saying that right out, and that causes fear, and that's why we have public, you know, wondering what's going on, and we have the power companies doing all they can to take the pollutants out, spending billions of dollars, and I just think the Sierra Club, I mean, there's so much, believe me, I've studied your group, I've studied Earth Justice and all the things that I see, the information they put out, and a lot of times they can't prove what you're saying, and I would just like us to start proving what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McNeil.
Yes, thank you, Madam Clerk.
Good morning, gentlemen. Gentlemen, first question, do you have a concern with the monitoring versus the modeling as far as a way to address the issues, to discover what's really out there?
Well, most of the experts in the field have moved more towards modeling in recent years, feeling that's more accurate. This bill, of course, would allow Ameren to do both if they want, and then to pick which one they want to make available to the DNR based on which one makes them look better.
But the monitoring, the actual monitoring, you do not have an objection to it particularly?
Well, I think it's sort of interesting that this bill allows Ameren to decide
Right.
where the monitors are going to be.
Right.
That must be pretty unusual in the field of environmental protection.
I just wanted to clear up whether you had a problem with the monitoring or the modeling. So the interesting thing in the bill for me is the piece that does say the department shall not submit a decision to the Environmental Protection Agency on the matter or the manner in which the data will be gathered for the second phase designation that is inconsistent with the election made by the affected source, and then under no circumstances shall the department complete the second phase designation. And process prior to the currently proposed date by the Environmental Protection Agency of 2020. So is this where you're getting the feeling that this is really an effort to delay the process?
Yes.
So if that part were removed from the bill,
Well,
that you know, says we will not report, would you be okay with the bill?
well, no. Right now, Ameren is under the gun to do something because they've been in
Right.
violation for years. So this bill says that they get to decide by December of this year what they want to do. And then, doesn't say when they're supposed to start monitoring, but they would have to have at least 12 months of monitoring data before any conclusion could be drawn. So they could decide to start monitoring in 2 years and monitor for a year and put things off for 3 years. There's no reason really to do that.
They indicated that they were going to start right away, you know, in their testimony, but there isn't anything in the bill that requires them to begin and to operate under that particular timeline. So, but if the timelines were removed or well, anyway, I think I have some concern about that, the piece in the bill that I've never seen it said under no circumstances in a bill. So I'm a little concerned about that.
Well, there's a history of the legislature handcuffing the DNR. You know, there's legislation that says the Clean Air Commission cannot propose any regulations that are not forced on them by the EPA. You familiar with that, Bill?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, that's.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bond, and I believe you had a question?
To inquire, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed, please.
Just briefly, it's my understanding, maybe you can confirm this for me, that the EPA in the guidelines that they set forward allowed for the option of either monitoring or modeling. Is that your understanding?
It is, but that option in general is given to someone like the Department of Natural Resources, not to the utility company.
I understand that. But the EPA did give that option, essentially tacitly saying that either one of those would be acceptable means. Do you disagree with the EPA allowing either or were they
No,
wrong
I disagree with
that?
this bill in allowing that
Well,
option to
but I mean
Ameren.
specifically to my question, was the EPA incorrect to allow one or the other when they set this up? Was the EPA wrong?
No,
So the EPA was right to allow either monitoring or modeling, and they're both valid ways to monitor, to make sure these SO2 levels are in check.
they can be in certain circumstances, yeah.
Okay. Having heard that the group has a willingness to meet these standards, do you prefer monitoring or modeling personally? Or would the Sierra Club prefer one or the other?
The information that I read suggests that modeling is becoming the preferred method because it's felt to be both cheaper and more accurate.
Okay. One final question. Do you oppose the use of coal in general?
I think, you know, the Union of Concerned Scientists has said that pollution from burning coal is one of the major public health issues in this country. Yes, I think burning coal is extremely dangerous. And now it's no longer necessary.
Thank you, gentlemen. I believe we have two questions over here. I will defer to the lady, Representative Huber.
Thank you, sir, to inquire.
Oh, please proceed.
Just a couple questions. You're talking about coal being such a detriment to health and causing COPD, asthma, but isn't it, more likely that cigarette smoking, is more health hazardous than burning coal for heat?
Yes, it probably is. I don't advocate smoking
Okay.
cigarettes either.
I kind of feel like this is almost a little bit of the sky is falling kind of thing. And then another thing, you said that you would prefer modeling because you feel that it's more accurate, but it's just based on a computer model, whereas the monitoring is actually taking samples. And my question as a physician, what do you do when you have a patient? Do you just look at them and take a computer model to see what their blood test results are, or do you actually take a sample of blood?
Well, actually, we don't use computer modeling for blood samples. but
Okay,
a lot of
you
the
take the
diagnostic
actual
technology
sample.
is based on computers, like computer